Hi, everyone. Just give us a minute so more people can join. While we're waiting for everyone, feel free to drop us a note in the chat to let us know where you're joining from. And another note before we begin, for those of you on Zoom joining, be sure to use the chat function instead of the Q&A if you just want to leave a note. And if you have a question, put it in the Q&A box just so that we can make sure that that's nice and tidy. I see y'all are joining from all over the US and even some international. Very exciting. Okay, we'll get started. Well, hello everyone and welcome to the Jobcast. The job market is a lot like other marketplaces. As an applicant, you can think of yourself as offering a service, your work, and employers as potential buyers of that service. And like anything else for sale, establishing your brand will help you stand out from the competition. So in this workshop, we are going to dive deep on how to create your brand as the best candidate to land the job you want. Before we begin, I'll cover a few housekeeping items. First, you're in listen only mode. You can hear and see us, but we can't hear or see you. And we're recording, but remember, you're not being recorded, just us. The recording will be shared out in a few days, and I'll be posting links to relevant resources in the chat so you can go deeper on specific topics that are of interest to you. But don't feel like you need to be actively clicking on every link if that'll be distracting. All of those links, along with the slides, will be shared via email after the presentation. And finally, we'll be using the Q&A feature in Zoom. An important note, if you post a question, your name will be shown unless you check the box to send anonymously. So if you don't check that box, your name and questions are going to be seen publicly during the webinar. And that's because you'll be able to upvote questions that are posted on Zoom to be answered live. So just give the question a thumbs up and we'll talk through the top voted questions at the end. So stay tuned for that. And please only post questions that will be relevant for others, since that'll get it upvoted and answered. If we don't get to your question at the end, you can post it later as a comment on the YouTube video so our team can respond there. And some introductions. So I'm Brandy Warbus from Indeed's Job Seeker Experience team. We're responsible for creating helpful resources and events like this Jobcast for our users, like you. And joining us today from London is special guest Joy Randolph. Tell everyone a little bit about yourself, Joy.
Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be talking to you all. I'm actually based in the UK, so it's so awesome to just go through the chat and see that the people from Trinidad, Atlanta, Utah, and California, and all over the world. So it's really nice to meet you. So I'm Joy, and I'm an entrepreneur. And over the past 5 years, I've helped close to 2 million people around the world essentially get hired, but not just get hired, but get really great job offers in as little as 30 days, and also negotiate and get a salary increase of up to 40%. Now, one of the things that I have found so interesting in the work that I've been doing is that I have received so many questions. And even though I've received a lot of questions, they really fall into kind of two groups, which is what should I put on my resume to get more job interviews? And what should I say in my job interviews in order to get the job offer? So it's one of those questions is something that you've been thinking about. I'm super excited about today's webinar because what we're going to be talking about is how you can have so much more success in every stage of a job search process. So whether you are looking to get more interviews and actually start getting interviewed in places that you're really excited to work at, or you're really excited about getting an actual job offer after you get into the interviews. We'll be covering all those things. Now, before I dive into this, I have a quick question for you, and I love that you're using the chat box already, so please keep using it. And my question for you today is, where in the job search process do you feel you are getting stuck? So is it A, in the application stage, i.e. not getting many interviews, or in the interview stage and not getting job offers? Wow, amazing. So many people are getting stuck in the application stage, but I've also seen a few people getting stuck in the interview stage and both. Wow, that is amazing. Thanks so much for letting me know, because I really want this conversation to be a conversation between you and us. So just seeing your engagement is actually really, really meaningful, because it helps me know exactly what to talk about. Wow, I love it. Love it, love it, love it. Okay, so given that so many of you are stuck at both the application stage and the interview stage, ooh, and I still saw a final round point. One thing that I know for sure is that right now your goal is to get an amazing job. And by this, I don't mean a job. I mean a job where you actually really enjoy it and you're thinking, I don't see myself resigning for a while. I feel lucky to get this job. So maybe you have a goal in mind, one that provides, a certain type of opportunity for you in terms of your career progression and certain types of benefits, whether it's salary or sponsorship or anything else that's important to you. And you also want it by a certain date. Now, the question that I have is, what strategy have you been using in order to get these results? One of the things that I have found so common is so many people use the best effort and hope strategy. What this basically is when you put in your best effort in your application and you put in your best effort in your interview, and then you hope that that will be enough for you to get a job. The question is, what happens if you've done your best and you still don't get the interview or job offer? How does that feel when you just keep doing everything that you're doing and you're still not getting results? I feel like a loser, depression. This happened to me a week ago. I can totally relate. Discouraging, defeated, disappointing. I can totally relate, because when I first started looking for a job, this really hit me when I was graduating from university. I went to a business school, one of the best business schools in the UK, and I thought that because I had been, working so hard to get my degree and everything, that I would be able to get a job. But every application I made actually got rejected. And I started to run out of ideas, because the more places I'd apply to, I would simply just get more rejections. I wasn't getting more interviews at that time. And then I started to run out of ideas, because if what I'm doing isn't working, what else am I supposed to be doing? And then I started to feel like I wasn't good enough, that maybe it would be very difficult for me to start getting dream opportunities because I wasn't qualified enough. Maybe I didn't have enough experience. Maybe I didn't go to the right school that I thought I should have gone to. I had all these reasons for why I was not getting the job. And I started to believe that even though I was doing my best was not enough. Now, it wasn't until I had a conversation with a mentor that completely changed the way that I looked at everything. He said to me, okay, Joy, what I want you to imagine that you are looking for a pen. So this might sound like a weird exercise, but just go with me here. So what I want you to do, wherever you're sitting, wherever you're watching this webinar from, imagine that you need to buy a pen, and think about, what kind of pen would you like to pick? Now, one thing that's interesting is that we have 2,700 of you here watching today, and I guarantee you every person here is likely to have a slightly different idea of the kind of pen you're looking for. Maybe someone's looking for a simple black ball pen, or someone is looking for a pink or gold glittery pen, or anything that is just different. Yeah, Muji pens, fountain pens. I can see already there's a difference. Now, what he said is that what ends up happening is that you end up picking the pen that best matches your taste and your needs in this exact moment. And so even though someone might actually prefer a pencil, or someone might actually prefer a crayon, that person who's looking for a pen just wants a pen. And so, in other words, if you are applying for a job and you're thinking, why aren't I getting the job? Sometimes you feel as though you're not getting the job because you're not good enough. When actually it's a bit more like the pen analogy, whereby sometimes if you're not picking the pencil or the crayon, it's not because you don't like pencils or crayons, or it's not because you don't like pink pens or Muji pens, whichever pens that other people are looking for. It's because you have your own specific needs and you're very laser focused on what it is that you want. And so what I learned was that the candidates that get hired aren't always the best. Actually, they're simply the best at communicating how they meet the unique needs of the hiring manager. Okay, so in other words, rejection isn't a sign of your worth. It's not a sign of your talent. In fact, pencils and crayons are loved by so many people. My toddler, I've got a toddler, and she is obsessed with crayons. I was actually, just before this call, I was actually scrubbing the floor from crayons. And so my point is that no matter who you are and no matter how different you feel you are, what makes you unique is actually what makes you valuable to somebody else. And so rejection isn't a sign of how good of a job you can get. It is simply a sign that you just need to shift your approach. Instead, thinking about understanding a company's needs and determining if you can authentically meet their needs, and also showing potential employers that you actually can meet their needs. Now, in other words, a personal brand, which is really what we're going to be talking about today, you can use a personal brand to show that you meet an employer's needs. And this is essentially what can help you get the interviews and the job offers. Okay, so this is all about showing employers how you can meet their needs. Now, one of the things that I'm really excited about today's webinar is that we're actually going to be talking about the really tangible steps that you need to take in order to build a personal brand that actually helps you start getting amazing job offers sooner rather than later. Now, one of the things that I learned is that one of the first steps that you need to take is actually, instead of hoping for the best in your job search process, that you actually start hunting for gold. Now, I'm not someone that understands much about gold. I don't know how to find gold, but one thing that I do know is that if I wanted to find gold, I couldn't simply walk down the street and hope that I will come across a pot of gold somewhere down the street. I've walked many places and I've never come across gold, even though I'm pretty sure that would be a pretty cool thing to come across. Instead, if I'm looking for gold, I actually have to be really strategic. Now, what I encourage you to do is to see your job search process not as something that is boring and something that you have to grind through in order to get the interviews, but instead, this is your chance to look for that golden opportunity for you. And instead of using your hope strategy and, do your best and hope for the best strategy, instead you're thinking, okay, I'm going to be strategic about how exactly I'm going to find the gold. So the question is, what is your personal brand? Because if you know that you want to get that golden job, that amazing job opportunity, one of the questions that you might have is, how do I use personal branding? So in short, what I will say is that at the beginning, when I came across personal branding, I always thought personal branding was kind of something more for celebrities, people that maybe were influencers on social media, and they were thinking about how they looked. And I thought, I'm just Joy. I don't have a personal brand, until I realized that actually, in summary, your personal brand is simply how people perceive you. So no matter who you are, where you're from, no matter how old you are, how experienced or how little experience you feel you have, you actually are still being perceived by someone. And so this can be everything from your story, your education and experience, your skills and expertise, your actions, your personality, just everything about you. It's kind of thinking about your friends. When you think about a certain friend, you will have certain things that come to mind when you think about them. Or a classic example is if you've ever worked in an organization and you've seen someone who was always really bubbly. And in your mind, you're thinking, wow, this person is always so happy and such a pleasure to work with. Those nuances are essentially what help to make up your personal brand. Now, one of the things to do when you're looking for a job is before you actually start applying, which is a step that I see so many people miss because we're so much looking for, just essentially looking for the job. And it's actually a step that I find gets missed so often, which is before you look for a job, actually think about yourself. What are your dreams? What would be genuinely a really good fit for you? Really kind of getting clarity on what kind of company would I love to work for? What's the dream role that I have for me? Because this is about you doing what's right for you. And sometimes we kind of lose ourselves in the process because we're thinking about either the necessity of needing a job for financial means, if maybe money is a concern, or we're in an unfulfilling job and we feel like we need to get out of it. There can be a lot of thoughts about everything else that we need to do and not much inner reflection on what we personally need. So really getting clarity on the roles and companies that excite you. Because what you'll tend to find is that the roles of companies that don't excite you usually aren't the best fit for you. And I've lost count of the number of times of people who have actually applied for a job they weren't really excited for. I mean, have you guys done that? Let me know in the comment box below. Have you applied for jobs that you haven't really been excited for and you just thought, why am I applying for this constantly? Yes, 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 yes. Well, I hope one thing you take away from this webinar is to stop doing that, because actually, if you really want to be successful in your job search, really get selective and start to create what I call a spreadsheet of your gold hit list of companies. So these are the companies that you feel if you could work there, that is kind of your golden opportunity. And really creating a list of your favorite companies can really start to help you get clarity on where it is that you want to start working.
Yeah, and of course, you can dig into a company's website and social media to learn about them, but Indeed also has company pages that'll help you do this research specifically from the employment perspective. And you can check reviews from employees, learn about the benefits, typical salaries, and if you find a company that you like, you can follow them so that you're notified about new job postings.
And that's one of the things, just before I go into the next slide, is that I actually had no idea that Indeed actually had this feature, because one of the things that I have found is that, it's really easy to go in for an interview and to get a job offer and then to realize when you get there that actually maybe this isn't the right fit for me. So actually really getting clarity on what it is what is a great fit for you can really give you an advantage, because you'll also know how to answer questions like, why do I want to work here? Because you'll actually be like, hello, I know so much about you. But also having tools like Indeed can actually help you get some insight into companies that haven't necessarily put this information on their website. Now, a quick question that I have for you is, when you're applying for a job search and you're applying for a job opportunity, how do you actually feel when an interviewer starts asking you the question, why should we hire you? So let's say you found a company that you really want to work at and you're like, this is a golden opportunity. And I see that a lot of you start to feel, okay, when you get asked that question, you're feeling either annoyed, nervous, uncomfortable, unsure, pressure, excited. Oh, I love that. But chances are that a lot of people feel anxious and nervous. And if you do feel excitement, then that's really great. And the reason why I really want to talk about this is because often once you find something that is really exciting, that you really want to do, then you really feel the heat, like you're on a red seat when you're actually being asked, well, why should we hire you? And the amazing thing is, this is when your brand comes in. Your brand is essentially what makes you unique. It's telling genuine and authentic stories about yourself. So one of the things quotes that you may have heard is, fake it till you make it. And though I do believe in a sense of obviously doing whatever it takes to have some confidence, one of the things that I found so amazing about selling yourself is that actually the person that's hiring you isn't actually a company. So you don't need to be fake and try and create a persona or a perception of yourself that isn't real in order to get hired. I mean, think about the times. Yes, exactly. Sometimes faking it gets you fired. Exactly. Think about the times when you have been able to have a real connection with someone and they've actually been so interesting, so helpful, and so authentic that because of that, you actually want to work with them. You enjoy working with them. You enjoy hiring them, or you enjoy, doing some sort of collaboration with them. So actually being genuine and authentic about why you want the role really, really makes a difference, because a lot of people still apply for jobs they're not excited for. So that genuine love for that company is really what's going to help you get ahead once you start writing your CV, writing your resume and your cover letter, and doing your interviews. And because you have done the prep work before, you will essentially know why you are a match made in heaven. Now, the thing that I know can get really challenging is that it's really easy to talk about things in a webinar, but the reality is that you're a real person that is going through whatever it is that you're going through right now. And you may have some doubts. You may have some fears on certain questions around how to best sell yourself as the best person for the role. So what I really want to do is I really want to use these next few minutes to really kind of break down the key steps that you can use to feel confident the next time you actually have a conversation with a recruiter or a hiring manager, and the next time you decide to apply for a role. So the strategy that I've used, which is something that I've learned in marketing. So I used to work as a branding consultant for global brands such as Nike, L'Oreal, and Unilever. And my job was helping them sell their products and really using branding. How can we brand their products as the best thing in the market? Now, it's one of those things where you kind of want to show you're the best, but actually it's really not really about proving you're the best. It's actually more about communicating why people should buy your products. And through that, I actually learned the ADA acronym, which is essentially an acronym that is used in marketing that you can actually use for yourself. Amazing. Oh my God, ADA, I learned this at school. Exactly. So that's the amazing thing, is that these are basic principles that you can use for the rest of your life. Now, the first thing is attention. Really, are you able to get the recruiter or the company's attention? How are you doing that? The second thing is interest, desire, and action. Now, I'm going to talk a bit more about this in greater detail, but I just want to share a bit of a quick story. So recently, really just recently, I think like last month, I decided to actually change careers and try and go into venture capital. Now, the thing for me is that, I'm in my 30s. I don't have any finance background. I had all these reasons as to why I might not get the job. But by applying this ADA strategy, I was actually able to get a job offer in venture capital, which was a completely new industry. I landed this job offer in 9 business days. Yes, 9 business days. I didn't even know that was possible. I got this job offer during the COVID-19 pandemic, and you can't see my bump, but I'm actually pregnant, and I also have a toddler that is almost 3. Thank you. So when I think about the scenario, if someone had told me getting a new job whilst you're pregnant and you have a toddler and it's the pandemic and you get a job offer in 9 days and it's in a different industry, it's like, what? Is that possible? And the answer is yes. Now I say this, thank you, thanks for the congratulations. Now I say this to say that no matter what your situation is, no matter how difficult things have been for you, you actually have the ability to use the strategy and make it work for you, no matter how challenging of a job you might be trying to get. Now, how did I do this? So first, remember that gold hit company list that I talked about? I used that same strategy. So I researched a list of potential employers and shortlisted the ones that I felt I was the best fit for. I came across one that happened to have a deadline, which was literally in a week's time. I wrote my applications using words and phrases that I thought would make them think I was an interesting candidate to interview. And then I asked the employer during the interview, I remember literally, I said to my interviewer, it was like a 15-minute interview with a partner, and he was talking, asking me questions. And I knew it was 15 minutes, and at 7 minutes, 30 seconds, I said to him, thanks so much for asking me all these questions. We only have 7.5 minutes left. I'd love to use the remaining 7.5 minutes left to ask the employer what their goals and needs are. And I just asked him, what are your goals and needs? So I just want to understand and ask you questions. And he laughed. And by being able to actually flip the conversation, I was really able to use the interview to understand exactly what their goals and needs were, as opposed to me trying to have to push and sell myself without really knowing what their goals were. And the outcome of that is that I ended up learning exactly what it is that they needed that wasn't on their job description. Has this ever happened when a company writes a job description and then they're going through all of this and then they find out later on that actually what they wrote in their job description isn't actually who they're looking to hire? And that's why it's super important to understand when you're actually speaking to the recruiter or hiring manager, what is this that you're looking for? What do you need? Because sometimes when they talk to you, they can communicate it better than in a job description. Yes, some job description sucks. Way too common. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so we'll be going through this now. So just to kind of summarize, there are 4 steps to building a personal brand that gets you noticed and gets you hired. The first is attention. So again, this is the AIDA strategy, attention. So what's the best thing you can do to attract an employer's attention? Second thing is interest. What can you share that will make potential employers interested in interviewing you? The third thing is desire. What are the employer's needs and how can you show them that you can meet these needs? And the fourth thing is, what are the final actions that you can take to land the best job offer possible after your interviews? So we're going to be going into this. Now with attention, let's start with attention. Now, I'm laughing because I remember a time when I spoke to someone who said that they had sent so many job applications, like a lot of job applications. And they were hoping that if I send like up to 100 applications, maybe I will get one or try 200 exactly, maybe hundreds. Maybe I will get 1 or 2 or 10, not only interviews, but also hopefully as many job offers as possible. But unfortunately, even though I can see the logic of hoping that it's a numbers game, that if you apply more, then eventually you'll actually get an interview, it actually doesn't really work like that if you want results in a faster way. What I've tend to find is, this may be a bit of a weird analogy, but imagine that you are single. Now, I know some of you might be married, in a relationship, committed, whatever, but imagine that you are single and there is another person that might be interested in you, and you find out that before they met you, they had essentially approached 100 or more people that they were looking for. And you are the 100th person that they've come to say hi to. Chances are, if someone is approaching that many people, when they're coming across you, they might not usually come across as genuine. You can always tell when someone seems to be less genuine because they don't seem to be that interested in you. They just seem to be talking to a lot of people. Now, when you actually send an application to just 2 or 3 or 4 companies, I guarantee your applications are going to be so much more powerful because you will have focused exclusively on these companies. Your interest for them will actually be so obvious that they can actually tell the difference between candidates who are their eyes are going across lots of applications and lots of companies, and they're not really focusing on one thing, and they're instead but you're instead only applying to them. Now, the thing is how do you get their attention if you've chosen them? Well, what I like to think of is actually having what I call an identity card. So, like if you're applying for a job, what you want to be able to work at that company. You want to be able to get your foot in the door. Because before you can actually work there, you need to be able to get your foot in the door. Now, the bouncers are essentially the recruiters. They're the hiring managers or the applicant tracking system at the door. And they're saying, you can't get in. You can't even get an interview here unless you meet the basic requirements for getting in the door. Now, they only open the door for you if you meet these requirements. Now, the things that can really help you get that foot in the door is what I call your ID card. Your ID card is essentially your resume or your CV. It's your cover letter, your online profile, whether you're on LinkedIn or you're on any social media platforms. If you have a portfolio, depending on the work that you're in, and also your website. In other words, if you have the right ID card, the right resume, the right cover letter, the right LinkedIn profile, and you are able to ensure that it's right by really focusing on one major thing. So I saw a question of, well, what do you put in your cover letter? Well, what you need to do is you need to write the key phrases and the key words that they're looking for in a candidate, because that is essentially what will open the door for you to have a conversation. So Brandy, yep.
So when you are creating your resume, it's important to view it as a recruiter would. And gaze tracking data shows that employers spend an average of 7.4 seconds reviewing a resume. So that is a very short amount of time for you to get their attention. And top performing resumes where recruiters spend most time and focus tend to have several elements in common. First, a clear, simple layout with clearly marked sections and title headers, a summary or objective statement at the top of the first page of the resume, and keywords for the job woven into the resume in relevant context. Now, I say in relevant context because you don't want to just stuff in keywords wherever you can fit them, because recruiters can tell and an applicant tracking system can too. An ATS is software used by employers to sort through all of the applications they initially receive for a job posting. So it parses the resume, breaking it down into sections to speed up the screening and selection process. And that's why we recommend avoiding complicated resume formats. And that brings us to putting your resume on Indeed, of course. By uploading your resume into your Indeed profile or building it on Indeed, your resume will automatically be in a format that's ATS friendly and can be shared with employers on mobile, desktop, or tablet devices. Plus, if you want a hard copy of your resume, you can click the download resume button on the right, and it'll generate a PDF for you to save or print in whichever template you select. With an Indeed resume, also, it's easier to apply to jobs with just a few clicks, even from your phone. And job seekers with an Indeed resume hear from employers 4 times more often. And that's possibly because it allows employers to find you. The same way that you're looking at job listings, employers search Indeed's resume database to source candidates for open roles, especially with the job market as it is today. It's a job seekers market, so you want to make sure that your resume is out there for them to find you.
Yes, amazing. And before we skip ahead, I just saw a couple of questions about the what is an ATS. So an ATS is an applicant tracking system. So what it basically means is that if you're applying for a job, exactly, if you're applying for a job online, instead of necessarily one person manually themselves going through every single application, what they may use is they may use essentially software that will then go through all the applications that have been received and essentially select and provide the recruiter with the applicants that are a really good match for what it is that they need, and that will save them time. I can't remember the numbers, but I remember that for some companies they might get 2,000 applications for one job posting. So imagine being a recruiter and having to go through all those job applications. And so that's sometimes what they use in order to save time. So if you make sure that you have the right keywords and the right phrases, that's what will help you get you past not only the applicant tracking system, but also the person who's manually scanning it themselves to see if you're the right fit for a phone interview. Now, the second question I've been asked is, what do you actually put into it? So one of the things that, we don't have enough time to go into the CV and the resume because this would be a super long webinar. But one thing that you can do is write what I call a unique selling statement. So I'm just going to give you an example. So when you're writing your CV or your cover letter, there'll be a time when you get the opportunity to share a little bit about yourself. Now, I'll give you an example of some bad examples of what this could look like. So one example could be, hi, I'm Shannon Brenner and I'm a career counselor. I hold a master's degree in education and I have 5 years of experience in career development. I've worked for a nonprofit career center and I'm a certified teacher, and I believe that career coaching can be a catalyst to change your life. The second one is, hi, I am Tom Hill. I'm a product manager with 10 years experience in the tech industry. I'm looking for opportunities in the London area. Now, I'm not sure about you, but as I was reading this, I was actually feeling a little bit bored. I kind of forgot what Shannon does and what her history is. I kind of have to go over it to remember. And the reality is that a lot of people that write their CV or their cover letter write it as if it's a bio, something where you're just sharing a little bit of information about yourself. I am this, I hold this, I have this degree, I've worked in this company, as opposed to telling a story about why you are an interesting person for them to talk to. So this is the difference. So the most important thing when you're sharing a little bit about yourself is to tell a story about, in really just 1 or 2 sentences, ways that you've helped companies get results, and also ways that this is relevant for the job that you want to do. So the 2 R's, relevance and results. So these are the same people, but they've essentially told their story in a different way. So, hi, I'm Shannon Brenner, and I help excellent candidates find excellent jobs. For example, I've helped a client change jobs with a 40% salary increase. I've helped a client develop the skills to deal with difficult boss, and I've helped a manager devise new ways to keep her staff motivated. So when you think about Shannon, Shannon 1.0 versus Shannon 2.0, it's the same person, but if I was looking for someone with this skill set, she would, the second version would instantly start to be of more interest to me. The second one, hi, I'm Tom Hill. I'm a product leader with a proven record of helping companies build valuable, innovative products and teams. My solutions have cut fashion returns by 4x, earned $3 million in gross margin for an e-commerce marketplace, and I've scaled a team from 15 to 50 in 6 weeks to rebuild a web and mobile app with over 1 billion turnover ahead of schedule. Now, the incredible thing is that what they're really doing is they're just talking about results. So I've seen a question there of, what if you don't have a story? Now, this is the thing that I really want you to focus on, okay? This is not about being good enough to get hired. It's simply about reflecting on what you have done in the past. So whether you're a student and what you have done, understandably, is focus on school, what are the kind of results that you've achieved that are relevant for the job that you want to do? And if you're changing careers, what are the things that you have done that show transferable skills that could be relevant and applied to your new role? Essentially, what you're looking to do is to show whether you've saved time, saved money, or you've helped a company make more money, or really just anything that is tangible for the profession that you're in. So then the next thing is to write your unique selling statement. So you can really communicate this in 1 to 2 sentences. So relevance is essentially who you are and the type of companies or people that you want to help. So who do you want to help, and what is it that you're really passionate about? That's really what you want to focus on here. The results is really the goals that you've helped companies achieve in the past. Results are really measurable and meaningful, as I've talked about earlier. Now, the amazing thing is that you can use your statement everywhere. So you can put it in your cover letter, your resume summary, in your LinkedIn profile, your professional website, and also in your interviews when you're asked, tell me about yourself. So if you ever get stuck when they say, so tell me about yourself, then this is what you can go to. And this is a story that you'll remember and they'll also remember too. Now, the thing to remember is to make sure that as you're doing this work, that you go through all of your online profiles and just make sure that you've gone through your social media and you've really made sure that your LinkedIn profile is on order,
and that you have a professional photo with just your head and a plain background, and that you don't have anything embarrassing that you wouldn't want an employer to find out about you on social media. So if you're ever unsure, you can always put your Instagram or your Facebook account on private, just so that whenever they search for you online, which they often do, what they find is consistent with how you're communicating yourself. Now, the third thing is to then go into desire. So this is the third step. So start to find out the employer's needs. Now, this I personally find to be the most fun and the easiest part, because you've already done all the hard work. This is all about asking questions such as, what are your biggest dreams for the company or the team? What are your goals? What are your biggest challenges? And what do you most need in a candidate? If you ask questions like this in your interview process, what you'll essentially get is a cheat sheet where they'll actually start just letting it all out, what it is that they're looking for, what it is that they need, what it is that they're struggling with. And you're like, And then what really helps is to, before you go into your interview, is to ask yourself and get really clear on whether you want to help them. So what are your intentions before an interview? What are your intentions of working for that company? What goals would you like to achieve whilst working there? Also, how would you like to help that company? And are you passionate about the problems that they are solving? Because if you're passionate about solving problems for them and you're thinking about the goals that you want to achieve, then the amazing thing is that when they start telling you what it is that they're looking for, you'll be like, oh, I can authentically help you. I can do this. I've been thinking about it. These are my intentions. These are my goals. And this is how I want to serve you. And you'll also be thinking about why it is that you're passionate about solving these problems. So the next time someone says, why should we hire you? You'll actually have answers, because it was going to be genuine and authentic. And you can think about case studies or stories of times when you've been able to solve similar problems and you've been able to help essentially achieve similar goals. Now, last but not least, it's to take the fourth step. Now, the fourth step might be one that gets overlooked, but this one is super, super important. And it's to take the next steps to secure the best job offer possible. Now, once you've gotten the interview, make sure that at the end you send a thank you email. And this thank you email can simply be sharing that you're really excited about the opportunity and sharing one thing that you really enjoyed learning about the company, and letting them know that you'd really like to hear about the next steps. And to then also follow up if you haven't heard from a recruiter. Now, this is a major one, because two reasons. I've actually heard of stories from clients and from people that have watched, just some of my YouTube videos, who followed up after not hearing from a recruiter after 2 weeks. And just because they followed up, they actually ended up getting a job offer within like a couple days later. And it might have just been that the person was busy, hadn't yet handled things. And they actually, instead of giving up and thinking, oh man, I didn't get the job, they did actually get the job. So make sure you follow up. Or they could respond and say, look, we're not sure if you're the right fit. Well, then the great thing is that you actually know. And the sooner you know, the sooner you can move on and focus on getting a response from companies that are actually a really great fit for you. And also really making sure that you negotiate your ideal job offer package. It's really important that you negotiate. Now, we don't have enough time to go into how to negotiate, but negotiating after you get the job offer can really help you increase your salary by up to 40%. Now, before we close up, because we've only got a couple minutes left before we start opening up for a Q&A, and I know that some people have said, oh my God, I didn't write everything fast enough. So this is a great time for you to ask questions. And there is going to be a replay for you, but I'm just going to do a quick recap. So the first thing is to shift your strategy from hoping for the best and doing the best to hunting for gold. And your hunting for gold strategy is thankfully not gold extraction, but it's instead ADA. So you get to use this to leverage your personal brand and sell yourself as the best candidate for the job, and to start focusing on what are the key companies I want to apply for, and how can I put so much attention into my ID card, and really using the right keywords to grab their attention so I get past the bouncers. And then to use your unique selling statement that we talked about to show them why you are an interesting person for them to call you. That's all you want them to do, to call you for your interview. And then to also use your interviews to find out as much as you can to essentially find out what it is that they're looking for. And last but not least, to take action and to take the next step so that you can secure the best job offer possible. So now we got time for your Q&A, and I'll hand it over to Brandy.
Thank you, Joy. I know that all of that went by pretty quickly, condensing a lot of information into a short amount of time. So as a reminder, the recording of this workshop will be shared with you in a few days, and all of the links that I've been sharing in the chat, along with the slides, will also be shared. And if we don't get to your question today, remember to post it later as a comment on the YouTube video we send out so our team can respond there. Now let's take a look at some of the top questions that came in. So first up, how many years do you go back for your resume to be relevant? Joy, I've heard like 10 to 15 years is kind of the max that we often recommend. What would you say, Joy?
I'd say the most important thing to ask yourself is, what of my experience is the most relevant and important for me to share? So I'm not sure how old you are. So, and it also depends on how many different companies you've worked for over maybe a 20-year period or a 30-year period or 40-year period, depending on your age. So the most important thing to ask yourself is, what is the most important thing for them to know? So I wouldn't worry so much about it if it's, let's say, 20 years ago, if it's not that important, particularly if maybe you're an executive and the work that you've been doing, or you're someone senior and the work you've been doing in the last 5 to 10 years really shows the kind of skills that you need for the position that you're applying for. So really just focus on the skills, and the position that you're applying for will really help guide you on what's important to put into your CV and what's worth taking out and not stressing out over it.
Great. And this is somewhat related, I expect. How do you suggest older workers deal with age discrimination during the hiring process? And I'll preface that by saying we do have a Jobcast webinar entirely dedicated to overcoming age bias in the job search. So I'll drop that link in the chat for you. But Joy, curious if you have any special tips for combating ageism.
Yeah, so I'd say with ageism, I think it's kind of a tricky thing because it's one of those things that I can imagine that you feel like you're experiencing it, but you're not quite sure how to prove it. And so, if it's already gotten that far, there's not much that you can do with that company because clearly they're not hiring in the correct way, because no one should be hiring someone based on age, or in other cases it could be race, or just any other kind of bias that is kind of like, really, we're going there, this is what it's coming to. So the thing that I found has given me the most power, even though I can't necessarily talk about age from the perspective of being maybe someone that is much older, because I actually do have a baby face, and a lot of people have thought I was 16 and I'm not. But the thing that I would say, the thing that's given me the most power is actually trying to imagine before going into the interview that my age is not an issue. Or in some cases, it could be their race, that my race is not an issue. And if someone is repelled by that, then I don't want to be with them anyway. And so if I focus on, okay, what's the value I'm bringing? Why is it that I want this job? Why do I believe that I'm the right fit for this job? And if I feel that energetically and I show that, then often your age or your race ends up being something that, if it could potentially raise some questions, it ends up being something that maybe doesn't get so much of a focus, if that makes sense, because everything else is just speaking volumes about yourself, that it's just a non-issue. And that's what you essentially want, is that you want your age to be a non-issue. So really focusing the conversation on why you want to be there. And it really starts with how you feel about yourself and how you feel in your head, because that will also communicate in how you're showing up in your interview.
Yeah, and some of the things that we talked about in that ageism webinar is combating that upfront in your job search so that you're not getting to the interview stage and people being put off by the fact that you're older, when you're actually researching the company, which as Joy talked about earlier, doing your research, making sure you're finding a place that is a good fit for you, you can use those company pages to see what is the culture like at that company. Do they value diversity, inclusion, to kind of get a preview of what you can expect. And you can also use that job posting to see if there are any indicators that they might be looking for someone younger. Some of the like coded language that we know exists is like digital native, or this is a fast-paced environment. They're kind of sneaking things in to make it seem like it's not being biased, but we know that there is some unconscious bias for everything that people do. You're not intentionally doing it, but they're just assuming that the right person for the role will look or be a certain way. So that's definitely an opportunity for your personal branding to kind of flip the script and think about, why would someone not want someone my age in this role? Is it because they need to be tech savvy? They need to, whatever it may be. How can you combat that in your branding, on your resume, in your interview, to show that you have those skill sets already? And that goes back to what Joy was saying as well, around finding out what they're looking for during the interview stage, if you get there, and being able to show that you meet all of those criteria, and that your age can actually be an asset rather than, a detractor for you, that you have the years of experience, you've dealt with a range of different types of people. Try and take that age aspect, and instead of, there are certain things that you can do to hide it, to avoid discrimination, like not putting your graduation date on your resume, that sort of thing. But all in all, once you get to the interview, they're going to see you. They're probably going to know how old you are. So it's really just a matter of getting ahead of it and making sure that your years of experience are seen as an asset.
Yeah, and just before you skip on to the next question, one thing that I do, and that I've always recommended people do, is at the end of an interview is to, ask, particularly if you're further on in the interview stage, is to ask, do you have any concerns about hiring me? I just want to know, like, during this interview process, is there anything that has come up for you that could potentially be a concern? And I've hired people, whenever I've been asked that question, I felt I've been put on the spot, but actually I've realized, you know what? It's a fair question, because everyone always has some sort of concern, and them sharing what their concern is can actually help you reassure them about wherever their head is going. Like I saw someone saying, oh, maybe you're not tech savvy enough, for example, and the other person saying, but what if I am tech savvy? You can say, oh, but actually I am tech savvy, I can do this. And you simply reassuring them actually can really, really help. So always don't be afraid to ask them, are there any concerns you have about hiring? Because that can actually be helpful.
Absolutely. I have asked that question in interviews as the interviewee, and been asked that as the interviewer. And I think that it's always really effective, just to kind of at the close, to remind the interviewer that, oh, well, maybe if it's hard for them to come up with something, you are a good fit. And it gives you that final chance to just say, even if you're concerned about this thing, I know because of my work ethic, because of whatever it might be, that I can meet that criteria for you. So another question here, I'm trying to change fields. How can I convey to potential employers that the skills I have in my current field easily transfer into another? That subject of transferable skills is so important. Joy, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so the first thing that I really want to kind of focus on is, when you're talking about your skills and you're changing careers, one thing that it's kind of easier to embrace once you can kind of focus on another topic is that it's hard to have the same amount of experience relative to someone who's been in that field for a really long time. So the question is, how do you stand out when what you have is transferable, but maybe not necessarily, it doesn't have the depth of experience that they might be looking for? So the first thing is to get really clear on why it is that you're changing careers. You'd be surprised how your passion and your hunger for this can actually be something that makes you stand out relative to someone who has a lot of experience, but they're not really passionate about being in the field that they're in. So it's all about making sure that you have other things that make you more valuable, rather than necessarily competing against someone who has been in that field for a very long time. The second thing in terms of your relevant skills is to think about ways that you can offer something that is different. So for example, I'll give the venture capital example. So venture capital, I have no finance background. In fact, in business school, the finance thing was just like, wasn't my strength. I was good at marketing. And so when I'm going into venture capital and they're asking me questions like, have you invested in anything before? And I'm like, no. I didn't know what to do. But what I did know is that I could say, I'm really passionate about making this career change. And what I really understand is how to market yourself. So venture capitalists, they need to raise money. So I know how to brand your business in order to make it easier for you to raise money. And also, I also understand how we can work with founders because I understand marketing and entrepreneurship and all that sort of stuff. So point is thinking about what is it that you've done that can help you look at things in a different perspectives that helps them as a team collectively do a better job, so that one person can be really good at something. What you offer can also be a really great asset, and you're not necessarily trying to mirror yourself as being as like everybody else, but you're actually trying to focus on the added value that you bring.
Definitely. And I dropped in the chat a link to one of our past job casts specifically about changing careers. So check that out. But just wanted to reiterate that a lot of the importance of when changing careers comes in that story that Joy talked about when you're, trying to get their interest, that personal selling statement, your unique selling statement. Being able to craft that story so that you're acknowledging your background and your experience before and making it clear how that translates into the vision you want for your career going forward, whether you're changing roles or industries or whatever it is. You want to make sure that you're kind of carving that pathway for yourself in your story so that the interviewer or employer can easily understand how or why you're going from one thing to the next and how you'll be an asset in doing that. So exactly like Joyce said, being able to pitch yourself as having that unique value that maybe the rest of their team doesn't have, and that's okay. That's why you're going to be extra valuable for them. So we'll do one more question here. How do I market myself in my resume without sounding arrogant or, on the other hand, desperate?
Right, that's a good one. How do we not come across as arrogant or desperate? So the first thing that I would say is to first get comfortable with selling yourself. If you feel uncomfortable writing about what you're good at or what you've done well, for you, it might come across as being arrogant when actually it's not being arrogant. You're actually presenting the facts. Okay. It's a fact that you are good at something. I know this. I may not know you, but I know that you are definitely going to be good at something, and you will have also achieved some results and done something that was meaningful to someone. So really be proud of who you are and what you've done, and feel comfortable in the first place saying that. And that's what will essentially help you to sell yourself without feeling as though you're being too arrogant. Because one danger is thinking you're being too arrogant when actually you're not. And by downplaying your successes, the employer doesn't know how much of a shining star you are. So make sure that you feel comfortable. The second thing is being too arrogant is kind of saying, I am the best, but having nothing to back up for it. So you don't necessarily need to say, I am the best, but you can go back to the story that we talked about in terms of giving examples of something that is relevant to what you want to do, and also providing an example of a result you've achieved in the past. Anyone that talks about relevant results they've achieved, that's not arrogance. That's actually just helpful information. And in terms of being desperate, The only thing I'd say is if you're saying, please give me a job, then maybe that might come across as desperate. But I'm sure that if you feel confident in yourself, you won't necessarily come across as desperate. In fact, you'll just come across as confident. So really just focus on being confident, knowing that you're worthy, knowing that you are amazing, and knowing that you can do this. And when you know that, chances are you won't come across as desperate because you're like, I've got this. If it's the right job for me, it will happen. If it's not the right job for me, thank goodness it didn't work out because I'm going to get the right job that is great for me.
I love that perspective. So we're at time, but if you found this to be helpful, check out our other Jobcasts at indeed.com/jobcast and follow Indeed on social media. So thanks to everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Joy, so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks. So nice to see you all.
Yeah.